Hello, everyone. Welcome to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. On today's show, I have Marc Wendt. But before I get to Mark, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this is a topic-based conversations about the ups and downs of dating. Whether you're 18 or 80 years old, you have a story to tell. But the gist of this podcast is just a conversation, no judgment. And today's guest is Marc Wendt. Mark began his coaching career at the age of 9, working with children of his parents' clients during a weekend workshop based on the work of Thomas Harris's book, I'm Okay, You're Okay. Since then, Mark has gone on to have a professional career in the film industry and for the last several years as a personal coach. Mark, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you, sir?
I am well. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, William.
Yeah, no, it's definitely my pleasure. And today's topic is a good one. How do men crack the code of emotional intelligence without coming off like simps? It's just definitely a topic I wanted to talk about. So, Mark, talk about first how did you get into the film industry, and then how did you get into personal coaching?
Well, the shortest version is that I worked really hard to get into the film industry. I did a lot of things, including a 2-year internship where I didn't get paid anything. That gave me a whole bunch of skills I never knew I would need, and then those suddenly became available. What started as a 6-month project turned into a year longer project, and then finally they were so enamored with the things I was bringing to the table that they decided to make me a full-time employee. That lasted 21 years, and the company was sold to another company. And at that point, I was in crisis. I was also, my marriage was breaking up. And so I had to redefine myself as a human being, as a man.
Right.
And I began a really deep dive and research into how I'd contributed to the demise of my own relationship and what I wanted to do with my life after having such an amazing time in the film industry. And I ended up wanting to go into business for myself and creating a coaching business so that I could be of service to men and women in the relationship field, and then also as an executive coach, because it turns out that being emotionally intelligent is a very powerful tool for executives.
So we'll definitely dive into that. So when you decided that you wanted to be a personal coach, was this something that you saw in the marketplace, or is something that, like you said, maybe you always wanted to do, become a coach and help men and women, or just people in general? Was it something in the marketplace that you saw might have been missing that you could have contribute and help those that might need your help?
Mostly what happened was I was doing a lot of personal work for myself, and this
Mm,
involved workshops and seminars and what's typically referred to as men's work, where you go and you work with men on what it's like to be a man and developing your masculinity. And what I found out when I was in those workshops was that I had a talent that was different than some of my other participants. And I started to realize, even through school and in my years before film industry and then during my years in the film industry, people would come to me and talk to me about emotional issues and issues they were having in their relationships. And I was always there with some empathetic ears and the ability to challenge them around their thinking and have them maybe try a little different than what they were doing. Turns out that if we do the same thing over and over again, we usually get the same result.
yeah, very true, very true. So let's talk about emotional intelligence, and and then again, without coming off like simps, if you could talk about what's emotional intelligence and what does that entail, for those of my audience that might not know, if you could talk more about that.
Sure. A lot of thinking gets done with the brain.
Mm,
And we commonly think about logical intelligence that way. But there's also this other part of being a human being, which is about what we feel. And that's both how we experience our body and then also the emotions that we experience. And when you start to study it and when you start to pay attention to your own reactivity, your own emotional responses, you begin to notice patterns. And the patterns I noticed were the result of, as I said, the training I received and also the work I've been doing on my own to become a better man. And I noticed there's a correlation between the embodied sense and the emotional sense. And the way we usually talk about this is I have a pit in my stomach and I feel fear, or I feel tightness in my jaw and I'm angry. Um, So when people get angry, what do? We say, all right, man, take a deep breath,
Right, right.
right? So I started to understand the relationship between our emotions and the body. And so emotional intelligence is being consciously aware with the logical mind of what our emotional state is. That's like step one.
Right.
And when we begin to have an experience of ourselves that where we can track from moment to moment what our emotional state is and be able to define it verbally, it creates a higher level of logical awareness. And when you can do that, you can then extend empathy to others because you have a point of reference for what they're feeling because you've felt it before and you can remember or understand or actually feel what it feels like in your body and in your emotional awareness. So, emotional intelligence is the ability to take that information that's coming from our bodies and our emotional state and use it in the logical speaking intellect.
So do we, and one of the main words of this of our of the title is simps. Do we now we could talk to other men about some emotional issues that we might have. Work sucks. My girlfriend is not emotional available, or she's not. We're not sleeping together as much. Do we talk to other females of other women about this, or again, is it something that men don't do, that we don't show our emotion to women, and if we do show it, are they going to look at us differently? Are they going to think of us, like the title of one of, of our conversation, looking coming off as simp, soft, he's not man enough? If you collaborate on that a little bit more.
Sure. I'm trying to draw off my own experience to try and make it relatable.
Okay.
I'm almost 60. I grew up in a period when the first feminist revolution was coming in the early 70s.
Right.
And the idea of what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be masculine in that period of time underwent a whole transformation. And one of the things that was happening in some of the areas of the country was this understanding of, well, one of the things men need to do is understand their feelings, right? It's basically this idea of what emotional intelligence is.
Right.
The thing that happened with boys who were born, without their fathers around and who had a lot of being raised by women and were part of this post-feminist growth period was they were overdeveloped in their feeling nature and their feminine nature. And so what would happen is typically they thought that what the world needed and what women were expecting of them was to be emotionally available, which isn't a bad thing. But if you go too far, you can lose capacities and you become so emotionally overwrought that you lose some of the more powerful masculine steadfastness, right? And so a simp is a derogatory term for someone who is just completely always in their feminine emotions, particularly a man. And the men who are emotionally overdeveloped tend to end up in the friend zone. We talk about that because women want to talk to them and they want to have emotional conversations with them, but there seems to be this piece missing for them, right? So you having that depth and the ability to have emotional intimacy with someone involves having the emotional intelligence. But if you throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, if you lose your masculine strength, your mojo, some people call it,
Right.
then you become less trustworthy. You become sort of vulnerable to the winds of your emotional weather. So the balance, the counterbalance, usually men go all the way to the other side, which is to be emotionless, impervious to emotions. Some people say stoic, but I think that's actually undermining the Stoics because if you do the research on people like Marcus Aurelius and Stoics, they were actually very emotionally intelligent people. So Stoicism is, in my view, the embodiment of power, strategic thinking, productivity, leadership, courage, all the things that we associate with certain designs of men and masculinity, and the ability to understand the poetic, the emotional. So if you know that you have a favorite song with your girl, that's a sign that there's some emotional intelligence there. But if you weep every time it comes on, that's kind of like losing your stature, losing your structure. And so you don't want to become totally like liquid vulnerability every time an emotional experience happens. But you don't also want to overcompensate and become immune to your emotions and nothing affects me, because then you don't have access to them, or the access you have is stifled. So the danger of overcompensating by becoming strong in your feelings can lead to becoming like a blobby lump of emotionalism. That's kind of what it means to be a simp. You don't have power. You won't stand up for yourself. You're always looking for that safe spot. You're trying to take care of other people's feelings, that sort of thing. So how to have emotional intelligence without becoming a simp involves knowing that part of yourself and incorporating it, integrating it into a powerful masculine presence, a powerful male kind of leadership, kind of strong and fully available for the discussion. So you listen well, you ask questions, and you can say things like, right now I'm feeling sad, or right now I'm feeling frustrated, or right now I'm feeling jealous, without fear. Because when you know yourself, when you're strong in yourself and you're fully integrated, it doesn't threaten you to be emotional for a moment. Like if you think about the last time you cried, William,
Yeah.
you cry for days without stopping.
No, it might have been a couple of minutes, if that.
Right?
Yeah.
So the reason we have that physiological response is it purges toxins and it allows all that emotional hormonal activity to take place in the body, be released, and then we're clear of it. We clear our thinking. So if you allow yourself to have an emotional experience, it usually won't overtake you for days. It's typically 1 to 2 minutes, just like you described. And then you can reintegrate, put yourself together, right? So a man who has access to his full capacities can recognize and allow whatever emotions come over him, and then still maintain his stability, his structure, and his capacity to be activated and do things and make cause and events happen.
Yeah. Wow. I was so enthralled in the conversation that you could have talked for another 20 minutes and I would have just listened. So, Mark, one question, and we're talking with Marc Wendt. Are we, so if we're talking to a woman that we with in a relationship and all that, and we're feeling some emotional way, tell me if I even close to having this right. Do we watch the tone of our voice to make sure that we don't come off as simp or come off too emotional, too weak to our opposite? Do we do we stand in a straight manner? Um, how do we avoid having that breakdown for 1 to 2 minutes and then having a woman say, "Oh, geez, this guy is, not as macho or not as masculine as I thought. I'm out of here." Do Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry,
every relationship is different, William.
okay.
And I'll just be honest, if I can't cry for 2 minutes with my woman, she doesn't deserve me.
Okay.
If she has so little faith in my capacity that if I have an emotional reaction for 2 minutes, then there's something else in our relationship that's not functional. There's some kind of history of her being in doubt of me. And that's usually about us being inconsistent, not showing up, not being able to deliver on our side of the relationship, hiding, avoiding, drug addiction, alcoholism, right? If you're already in a situation where a small emotional experience causes the woman in your life to lose all faith in you, I guarantee you it's not that 2 minutes of emotional experience that caused it. It's something else. It's usually that you've been inconsistent and not showing up in your full expression before that. So if like when I do relationship work with someone, you can have men that are more on the emotional spectrum, men that are more on the shutdown, like non-feeling end of the spectrum, and both I can work with. There's not one right way to be. The idea is to find a partner and to know yourself and then learn to grow in the direction that you need to grow. So if you're very unemotional and you want to have more intimacy with women, then you want to learn to grow your emotional intelligence and be able to implement it in conversation and be real and authentic and vulnerable at times when it's appropriate, when it makes sense, when it's real. If you are lost in your feelings all the time and you're always wondering why you can't have a girlfriend, then because you're in the friend zone all the time, then you probably want to move more towards what it means to have a strong presence, a strong masculine presence. Or, I mean, we live in a non-binary world, so there's a million different ways relationships work. I mean, we see this, right? We see how there's women and women together, and if you look at women relationships or men relationships, you can start to see some of these polarities existing, but it's not necessary to be one or the other. You don't have to become something you're not. The idea is, where can I add to my capacity? Where can I be more potent or more sensitive so that I can have more enjoyment in life, so that I can have more depth and more intimacy with my partner? And then also learn my wants and preferences and stand for them. Like if you're towards the simpy side of the equation, you're probably settling for whatever you can get and you have very little standards. When you start to have standards that are real, that are based on you knowing yourself and knowing what your needs are, then you start to weed out people that aren't going to be a good fit for you. And it takes courage and it takes presence to go out and be alone and still have purpose and still do work in the world. Because if you're lining up your purpose and your whole life around getting a partner, you're eventually going to break down the relationship, because they're not in relationship with anyone except the mirror image of themselves, if that's what's happening, right? So becoming fully yourself involves a journey from whatever end of the spectrum you might be on towards the things that you want more of. And you get to choose when and how you arrive. And then you look for someone who matches that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I was going to interrupt, but go ahead.
So the idea is that you're not stuck. Wherever you find yourself in this world, you're not stuck. And you can change things. And depending on what it is you want, you have to be pretty persistent and devoted. It's just like if you want to be in shape, you have to go to the gym. If you want to eat, if you want to be healthy, you have to eat right, right? These are the things that you have to do. So at the end of the day, if you're not practicing it on your own, you need to find people that will help you. Coaching's a great option. Joining a men's group is a great option if that's what you want. The thing about men's work is that it's both. It's strength, it's perseverance, it's purpose, but it's also emotional intelligence. And that's one of the amazing things about the various things that there are. The Mankind Project, there's lots of different places to go and to create the kind of internal work. What I wouldn't suggest you do is that you try to work that out with your partner, especially if she's female. Like, you don't want to be in a therapeutic process with your partner. You want to actually keep that to yourself, okay, and work through that on your own. And then when you're sharing time with your intimate partner or a potential new intimate partner, you want to be authentic. You don't want to hide stuff, but you also don't want to engage in the areas where you are working on things, where you're trying not to be your old self. And it takes practice. And what I can say about my own life is, when my marriage ended, I was really devastated. I didn't want my marriage to end. My wife was the one who ended the marriage, and I wanted to know what it was about me. And I started to realize that it wasn't about me, really. There were some things I did want to change about myself as I got more and more intimate in the ways I caused the breakup. I understood my own, there were some things about alcoholism in there, things like that. Sure. But once I understood my own value and I started to be more discerning, I realized, man, I probably should have been out of that marriage a lot sooner than I did. And I was able to take and practice how I show up in a way so that it became second nature. It wasn't, I was trying too hard. I wasn't putting on a mask to become someone. And pretty soon, women began to trust the reality of who I was. And I got more dates and had the most amazing sex I've had in my life in my early 50s as a result of finding this balance. And I had my own particular flavor. I like strong women, and I'm a sensitive man, but I'm a strong enough man that a strong woman can test me and I don't fade. She can trust that if shit hits the fan, I'm going to hold it. Pardon me. I don't know if this
No,
is
no,
a,
yeah, of course. No, no, no.
yeah,
Please feel free.
right.
Feel free.
So
Yeah.
if, if you want to discover more for yourself, there's no right way. There's no formula. The idea is, what do I want out of life? Do I want a woman who's more submissive and more, you know, soft and feminine and wants to be like in service to me? Or do I want a woman who's more my equal and more potent and powerful? Who do I want to be? Those choices matter. And then how you develop yourself, it contributes to your success. Now, here's the caveat.
Mhm.
When we're really young, we don't have the kinds of intelligence and filters to protect ourselves from the impacts of certain kinds of behaviors, either from parents or people who we are associated with. Up until about 5 or 6, stuff just happens and it goes right into your subconscious mind. And as young kids, we develop coping mechanisms for how we behave in that situation to compensate for the way that it triggers our fears of abandonment, fears of non-safety. You know, there's as many people as there are different issues. The thing that happens, though, is those become ingrained in the subconscious, and they become habitual patternings that play out in adulthood. So when that's happened, when you've got trauma that induces that kind of behavioral set, it takes work. You can't just do a couple of weeks and read a book. You actually have to get in there and work with the trauma and work with the things that are driving the subconscious decisions you're making. Because oftentimes, suddenly we realize something happened and we're no longer where we thought we were, and we don't know why. So you have to make those deep-seated fears and those deep-seated wounds conscious. It's called shadow work by C.S. Jung, the great psychologist. And once you do your shadow work, when you do that stuff and you make your weaknesses conscious, they don't just go away. But what happens is when they're about to happen, you catch them first. You have more ability to recognize that you're about to have this thing that triggers you happen. And so you take your conscious awareness and you shift your habitual behavior in a new direction. And that is, for me, I'm still on that journey. I am a coach, but I still have a coach. I'm in a long-term relationship with a woman who's brilliant, who I love. And things crop up and old behaviors sneak up on me, but I'm better at it than I've ever been before. And that's the best outcome, is that you practice and you become more aware, and you don't try to set yourself up for this ultimate perfection standard, because that's usually just drives men insane. You know, men have the highest suicide rates of the two sexes, and
Yeah, no, I
men
heard
are
that.
struggling with these issues. And so what I want to tell you, men, if you're listening to my voice, is that it's okay. Wherever you are on this process, it's okay. You're probably a good man, and you just need a little bit of time to get yourself to a place where you'll feel even better about yourself. And that's the key. The captain of your own ship, with kindness and generosity in your heart, and the strength and perseverance of manhood.
Wow, I couldn't have said it better myself. And you know, one of the things that you hit on, Mark, that I want to touch base on for me personally, I remember growing up, and I would see some of my friends, the way they would treat their girlfriends and all that, and I wanted to do the opposite, you know, and I didn't know at that time. So I'm talking about my 20s and 30s, that I was an early simp, where you know I didn't want to like hurt the relationship. I didn't want to cause a stir. So I would take things, and then I realized, like, what the hell am I doing? What's wrong with me? Because I have to admit, I did everything the opposite my friends did. And I saw they had long-term relationships and mine was short-term. And, you know, maybe probably if not, I ended up in the friend zone even after a few dates here and there, because I felt like I needed to be such a gentleman, open the door, not make a move, you know, be polite, not fight back. And it was constant, Mark. And it wasn't until a few years later, my 30s and 40s, that I finally became self-aware. Do you run into that more now, as you know, now that you're doing personal coaching, where men are just, you know, whether they're young or older, they're not aware of that they were simps and maybe continue to be simps?
Well, for one, I'd like to neutralize that word,
Okay,
right?
yeah, please.
Not very constructive to think
Yeah,
of yourself in that way. So for now, the serviceability of that word has helped us, but now let's try to just not label ourselves as anything.
right.
And to answer your question, I see a mixed bag. Like I said, there's a spectrum of emotional intelligence, right? And there's places where if you're over emotional, you're kind of in your feminine too much, then that's not going to work for you unless you want to be with a masculine woman.
Right.
And then if you're overly stoic, you're too stoic, or you're too shut down, or you're wearing a false mask pretending to be a strong man, then you're going to have the opposite problem, which is that you can't connect and you don't feel satisfied. And the women you're with, they might like you and they might even want to have sex with you a lot, but they feel there's something missing and there's no intimacy there. So the thing I found is that everybody's different. Everybody has a mixture of these different elements in their biographies. And the idea is to get clear on where you want to go. What is it you want more of, right? Do you want more independence? Maybe you don't want to be so dependent on relationships. A lot of guys, they define their value by where they are in their relationships. And some guys are so like, I don't need women, that they actually talk themselves out of some really great relationships, some having a real ride or die partner because they're just not emotionally available.
Right.
So it really is about courage in owning where your weaknesses are, being willing to reach out and have conversations with people that know what they're doing. And, just right now you can call me, but there's a website, it's a website for the Center for Nonviolent Communication.
Mm-hmm.
If you Google the Center for Nonviolent Communication, you're just going to find some resources, one of which is their list of emotions. And there's over 128 different emotions, positive and negative. And as men, we typically know three. Like William, name the top emotions. Name as many emotions as you can.
Anger, frustration, and I'm doing the bad ones. Anger, frustration, pissed off. I'd say those are my top three.
Right? Love, jealousy, fear.
Sure. Fear.
Right?
Yeah, definitely
Joy,
fear. Yes.
happiness, right?
Yeah.
Right. So this is not our fault, man. We are not educated in this arena very well.
Right.
Something that's missing from most of Western culture is the emotional intelligence. But the truth is that's changing. The world around us has a lot more available in it. Like you can just go to YouTube and look up emotional intelligence and you can find a ton of stuff. So wherever you're at in your journey, whatever you want more of, I'm here to tell you you can have it. And it requires that you be strong enough in your commitment to yourself to achieve what you want. Mm. And it's a journey, it's not a destination. And there's no formula. It's you might get to a place with a woman where you think everything's going great, and I guarantee you things are going to shift magically. Something is going to change, and the old patterns you thought were put slot A or tab A into slot B, or push 16 buttons this way and everything's fine. That's not going to work. You have to learn to be in the moment, connected to your own emotionals and then hers as well, so that then you can hold your own and hold her. So that if she gets emotional, she trusts you. And so that if you are strong and trustworthy, then when you do want to communicate some emotional information, she doesn't feel like, oh my God, that strength is gone. Like I can't trust him anymore. There's consistency that has to show up. And then malleability, the flexibility. Anyway, I get very excited about this because my purpose and mission is to serve and to learn. And I want to make a difference in the world one man at a time, one person at a time.
No, believe me, you have. Like I said, I wrote down so many notes and things, and I'm like, whoa, this is definitely. I'm glad to have you on. I mean, and first of all, Mark, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really appreciate it. And I know in your website you do webinars. I guess are there different types of webinars, or is there particular webinars?
Well, there's one that I'm focused on now that is being picked up by someone called the Saffron Group. Okay. I did a bunch of it started with a lecture that I did. Some guys invited me in Germany to do a lecture for them. And then once I'd done the lecture, I was like, wow, there's something really here. And so I started giving it more often. And it turned into a webinar where it's called the neuroscience of manifestation.
Mm.
Manifestation is kind of a woo-woo subject. People like to talk about how to use the law of attraction to create wealth or whatever. And that's all fine and good. But understanding why do some people get it and some people don't is a function, again, of how the body works, neuroscience of it. It's not just a spiritual thing. Like, there may be a spiritual element. But what I try to do in this lecture is ground it in the ideas of neuroscience, because I think that's more bankable for people. It's more tangible for people. And that lecture leads into a ritual. It's called the manifestation initiation. And that's a special thing that I offer as part of my coaching. But the webinar is free. And I don't have any offers for that right now. I'm going to be doing some in the future, specifically with the Saffron Group, because I'm partnering with them to do some workshops and some things. And so we're going to do this, I think, in early November. We're going to do the webinars, and then there'll be some signups for the first of the year.
Okay.
And in addition to that, I do one-on-one relationship coaching, one-on-one, personal development coaching for men, and then for executives as well. It's odd, though. About 25% of my clients turn out to be women, even though I'm so male focused, because it's about being a human being. Ultimately, that's what it's about, is emotional intelligence in human beings. And well, how does this work for executives? Well, the truth is, if you want to get that last 15, 20% out of your employees, emotional intelligence is the most overlooked aspect of business. And there's something that I'm working on called professional intimacy, which is how to have emotional intelligence that's geared and structured for the environment of corporations and businesses, where you're not breaking the rules with HR, you're not developing favorites, right? You're not developing things at an emotional level that are out of sync or out of against the law, right? But you're still realizing that people are human beings, and their productivity and the way they deliver for you is based on their emotional investment in the why of what you're doing. So this skill set is serving me well. It's serving me in my mission of trying to do good in the world. And there's nothing more satisfying for me than seeing a guy totally throw out his dating profiles and start from scratch, and then start to have all the kinds of success that he wants. And then with regards to the manifestation process, I have young men who come to me and I help them train to really develop their businesses and really break through to being the men they want, being productive, being part of the iterations, part of the new way we're going to reshape the world. A lot of people are sitting around going, we're doomed, things are awful, blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling you, that mindset is not going to make it better. And I'm ready and willing to show you how to shift your attention and shift your approach so that you can create something amazing in the world. And as you can see, I'm really emphatic about it because I'm really inspired. Yeah. I'm really inspired because my success is something that's only worth something if it's shared, right? It's not about me. I'm not wealthy, honestly, but I'm wealthy in spirit.
And that could be enough. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, you want to be wealthy also in the pockets, but I think it's all about sharing and passing it forward, which is what you're doing. I mean, again, Marc, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And somebody want to get in contact with you, website, social media.
Website,
what's the,
Yeah, marcwendtcoaching.com, which is MarcWendt coaching.com. You can also call me at 415-328-7668. It's a business phone. That number is published all over the internet. It's not like you're going to be, I'm hiding that number. And if you go to my website, one of the things you'll find there is a 60-minute introductory call that's free. We just get on a Zoom call and we'll talk for an hour about what you might want. There's no obligation. And for some people, I can make impacts right then, and they go off and and other people recognize, oh, there's something deeper I want to work on. And then we could talk about what it's like to work with me as a coach.
No, sounds good. And before I let you go, you talked about a book earlier. Was it Stellar Work? Any other books you want to recommend? Your books, if you have any, because you should.
I'm working on a book, but it's still in a really rough form.
Okay.
It's called Coding for Intimacy, and it's geared for tech people who tend to be very logical and very intellectual. And it's about how to systemize and begin the process of awakening that part of you that's emotional intelligent, and how to have that framework again in a scientific way. Okay. One of the great books is a book by Chris Voss, and it's called Never Split the Difference. And it's typically a negotiation book, But the core of Chris's work is something called tactical empathy.
Mm.
And I use that book with my emotional intelligence clients as well as my executive clients, because that book has so many things in it that are about connection and about how to negotiate. And when you're in a relationship, negotiation is there all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? So Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference is an amazing place to start.
And it's funny, I heard of that book, so that's a book I have to add to my collection. And the other one was a scholar work. Did I get that wrong?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Another book you had mentioned earlier in our conversation. Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but I'll definitely put on the show notes "Never Split the Difference" by Chris Voss. So I'll
Yeah,
definitely do
there's a
that.
ton of books. Another great one is King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which are the four masculine archetypes. King,
Okay.
Warrior, Magician, Lover. That's a great book. I'm actually considering an addendum to that book that adds a fifth archetype.
Ah.
But I have a lot of work on my plate right now, and I don't have time to write that book. I'm working on one right now, and I'm only halfway through it. And I'm studying. I'm in a 3-year program of Hermetic Sciences. So I'm also in a mastery program. So I'm a very busy person, but I'm really grateful, William, to have the opportunity to speak to you. And if there's anything I can do for you, reach out to me.
All right. Well, yes.
You know,
My God, I appreciate everything. I mean, Mark, I just, just kept on writing because you had so many great value adds, and I appreciate everything you did for this podcast. I really do.
great. Well, let me know when it comes out. I'll cross promote it as well.
I will. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. Well, everyone, that was Marc Wendt, and you can find him at markwendtcoaching.com. That's markwendtcoaching.com. Mark, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. Much appreciated. You can find me on peopleondating.com. That's peopleondating.com. Check out our past shows, check out our blog, and we have a resource page. Also, you can find me on Apple Podcasts. Please go there, subscribe, leave a review, tell us how we can make this show better. We're also on Google Podcasts and Spotify. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. On behalf of People on Dating, I'm Will Morales. Until next time, thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and please stay safe. Bye.